Alright, hello everyone, my name is Disc. I'm a title healer from the War Within, and in this video we're going to cover a Seat of the Triumvirate as Voidweaver, Mythic 0, probably the last Mythic 0 of the channel for a while. But before we get into the video, please remember, please give a like, comment, and subscribe on the video. Check out my Medify, I have it all set up for this season to begin. Great way to support the channel and grow as a WoW player. So here we have our talents. I did want to jump right into this section of the video as the intro and talk about a couple things that have been happening with Discipline and kind of give my 2 cents on the matter and show some graphs and talk about just my opinions on things. But I'm not too sure if this is the exact build I ran in the key, but this is going to be the build I'm going to be sampling moving into the actual season. But as everyone might know by now, Discipline got a 12% damage reduction, along with a couple of healing buffs. But I think what I find frustrating in all of this is that so many people have come to me in the comments and in DMs saying, you know, have we been executed? Is Discipline even playable now? And I really hate that that's kind of like the takeaway when people see number changes like this. And I can't help but feel like that comes from the content creators. You know, these people that are repeating this rhetoric, they've just heard it elsewhere and it instills fear in them. And it's like this, I don't know if fear mongering is the right way to go about it when talking about other creators. But I think they like to live in this world of chaos because maybe it promotes engagement on their videos, or I don't really know. But I just think it's so harmful and destructive to the game. And it only serves to like scare people away from playing something they think is fun. And I think it blows out of the water, you know, something that's just really not even that big of a problem. So I wanted to show here on the screen, this is a graph that I found of raid so far. And as we can see, Discipline is on top of the graph by a mile. This is representing damage per second. So I just want everyone to remember that a couple of weeks ago, we got a 60% increase to the Entropic Rift. This is our main spell. Then we also got a 30% increase to our Void Blast. This is our second main spell. And then we also got a 20% increase to Penance. That's our third main spell. So we've had 3 major buffs to our numbers. And then now moving into the season, they've had to quell it back by about 12%. So imagine if you're looking at this graph, we're still going to be far in the lead. That does not mean we're not playable. We have not been executed. And I would really just encourage people to, you know, as you hear those things, as you see tier lists, I guess I'd just really like to encourage you to start looking at them from a different point of view, that these are people trying to drive and incite, you know, I mean, I think you get what I'm saying. They're trying to just conflate a situation, make it something to talk about, put others down, instill fear in others. And that's just not really what my channel is all about. I'm going to play Discipline. I want to play Discipline. Voidweaver is still going to be on top when it comes to damage output, which is something I find fun. At the same time, I still will likely be switching to Oracle once I get to IO keys that really matter, like in the 18 range. And then, you know, I think it's also fair to say over the next month or two, we're likely to see all of these numbers get readjusted again anyway. So I like to just go with the flow, take things with a grain of salt. I have to assume that developers are doing this to help balance the specs. And when you think back to that graph, we are way in the lead compared to anyone else by a long shot. So bringing us down by 12% is just putting us more on par with others. It does reduce our atonement healing, which is a main driver of Voidweaver. But a couple of things I wanted to highlight here in the talents that I'm doing and have been doing to kind of help counteract that is I think the biggest one here is Blaze of Light. This increases our smite and penance. These are two of our biggest drivers as Voidweaver. We also have the Greater Smite. That stacks and pairs pretty nicely with Blaze of Light. And then this is one I'm pretty sure it's going to be controversial for a lot of people, but I just like it. So I'm not going Lenience, I'm going Holy Ray instead. So this is buffing Penance, this is buffing Penance, this is buffing Smite, this is buffing Smite. We're still banking way down into Expiation, getting all the shadow damage we can. And the last thing I want to talk about here before we start the video is a couple thoughts I've had on dot management and dot spread and dot talents. So I think the more common choice is going to be Painful Punishment over Encroaching Shadows. But the more I think about it, I just think I'm going to be able to get more out of Encroaching Shadows. I think there is more to gain from Encroaching Shadows if you're good at target switching, if you're good at seeking executes, if you're good at switching targets for your penance for dot spread. I think you'll get more out of it than Painful Punishment. You're putting more seconds of dots in the field. And at the moment, I'm pairing that with Pain and Suffering. I think this is definitely going to be a flex point into Shadow Mend. As we get in higher keys, this is one of our spells that was buffed. But I am going to be sampling with 1 point in Pain and Suffering. I'm not going full out on Apex Talents. And I've even considered taking 1 extra point out. That might be the most troll thing I've ever done, though. But, yeah, so Encroaching Shadows, I think it's going to be a little bit better for me over Painful Punishment. This is going to be a talent that just adds a lot of work to your gameplay with target switching. So if that's something you think you're good at, if that's something you think is fun, I think you can get more out of this. You just have to be really vigilant with switching targets for the appropriate spells. With all that being said, I hope you learned something from this video. It was requested a lot. People were saying Seed of the Triumvirate was seeming a little difficult for them. So I wanted to try and give a highlight here of the way I approached it, some things we can do to help calling out some boss timers. But yeah, before we clip over, comment, like, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Before the season starts, check out my Medify for private lessons. And let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, here we go. So this is my main tank on his ult. Makes a mistake here in the beginning, so let's read him for it. Not too sure what actually happens. Let's see. But the talent Phantasm is going to do great for this front room. I don't have it in this build because there's not too many consequences in Mythic Zeros. Okay. So he did die with a Paints Up. He also died barely having atonements. So I'll take partial blame there. Here goes the second Paints Up. My Rift is out. My focus is set on the Subjugator. Grid 2 for the win, showing my atonements as a blue. And we had a pretty nasty change to Blizzard API this week. I hope we can find a workaround in the future. But with Platinator, or I guess with any add-on, we can no longer change the color of nameplates when a mob is in execute. Apparently that was somewhat of an exploit when they took it out of the game, so that kind of sucks. Still want to do your best to get them. Penance mobs that have dots for dot spread if you're playing that point. And it's all of those chains mechanics. Phantasm will free you from them. And you pretty much get a Phantasm for each chain mechanic. Okay, here goes our boss. We have this single target attack. We see it in party on the mage. Great place to put a shield. Don't really need Paints Ups for those. But also if you're using the add-on or something to indicate targeted casts, it'll kind of help you see where it's going. As a secondary solution, using party nameplates can help you see who's selected because I don't think there's an aura associated. Yeah, look at me this time. So there is no aura, but with the targeted cast add-on, you can very clearly see where that's going. And as a Disc Priest, giving that person a shield is a good idea. So this right here, the Crashing Void, great place for an evangelism, or at least one of your instant cast radiance as a reaction. That's what I did there. And it looks like I had PI for most of that fight, so losing some uptime on it. Not too sure if it came up during the boss fight or before it, but yep. So there are charts out there for what specs best take PI. I'm probably going to lean into those more as we get into difficult keys, but at a Mythic Plus or a Mythic 0 level, you're likely going to have outliers that aren't doing their job that great. Might be a good idea just to look at your DPS overall and PI the person who's doing best. Like for example here, I think a Frost Mage on paper might get better value, but the Shaman and the Druid are doing way better. They're just playing their class right. Okay, but PI was sent there. We see magic dispels in party. Not too sure exactly what that dot does, if anyone wants to let me know. I think it maybe increases shadow damage or something like that. Okay, so I'm setting my focus on the big one, the Rift Warden. I used my Fade because I was selected. Switch targets for an Execute. Okay, let's see. I've still not played Uppies. It would have been really nice to play it on the first pull. And higher keys where you can actually like really start feeling the cadence of a fight or the repercussions of mechanics. Playing your Uppies with a little bit more uptime is going to be important. And something you should always try and do, especially when it matters, is before the collapse of a rift, play atonements as necessary. So like if I have an instant radiance in my back pocket, generally I try casting that out the last second possible before a collapse. Or if you have to, you can work in an instant cast, another instant cast atonement spell, like a shield, plea, flash heal. But always think about trying to toss out an extra atonement when needed before a collapse. Okay, we have PI, we have Evangelism, we have Uppies still. It's kind of just rinse and repeat here. That time Evangelism was played off myself instead of the tank to get full coverage. And I meant to talk about it sooner, but I have a macro that I've designed that will play all of your Evangelism and Radiance off the tank by default. Makes a big difference in your ease of casting. Basically what we're doing is we're taking out the work of having to mouse over on a spell that we play every 3 or 4 seconds. Saves a lot of headache. Ask if you have questions. Also, I guess while we're ramping here, shout out to the author of the add-on Voodoo Casting Bar, changing the color of my cast bar based on spell school. Alright, so things to watch for in this boss. Firstly, I have no dots out, which is cringe. Second, we have single target bleeds. We see it on the Druid right now. And then this mechanic does group damage. And you want to place your circle on balls. So Not everyone did that. What's going on here? Okay, looks like I fumbled a little bit with my spells. I just wasn't spell casting. Switching targets for my dot spread. And in a fight like this, especially if you're playing Encroaching Shadows, a small mini-game you should challenge yourself with, keeping your dots active without having to cast a dot. But I definitely think playing Expiation, right now Discipline is just in a spot where we are casting our dot more. We're just eating it up. Okay, we have PI. We still have uppies. Looks like I'm just practicing my rift rotation. What's going on here? Man, I'm hungry.
Find their viceroy near the entrance to the temple, feebly trying to break in.
Okay, so these have 2 target cleave mechanics. Upfront damage followed by ticking damage. And in higher keys, it does become quite lethal. So in higher keys, it would definitely take paints ups, definitely take defensive penance. But in Mythic Zeros, you can likely get away with just practicing your rift rotation, letting your atonement do the work. Okay, so I paints up myself and a defensive penance on myself there. I was getting selected with a lot of mechanics. Another defensive penance. Well, I guess, yeah, as I was saying, you don't have to use defensive penance too frequently. But still important to do if you want people to live. Okay, and then this is where the mechanic, you can see it start overlapping and causing problems. So this is where you really want to play extra defense, because you can get selected twice in a row. Okay, our tank here is really trying to push me, so let's make sure everyone stays alive here. This is not a standard pull. Climb. Penancing mobs with dots. Using death on executes, using death on dots. And we have a lot of overlapping mechanics here that you wouldn't see otherwise. But we have a lot of single target attacks. So tracking where auras are with grid 2, seeing where that targeted cast add-on is highlighting people, and reacting. Before we get into boss, I had a comment where I talk about Mythic Zero compared to higher level keys. If you ever hear me do that, I do not mean to talk about it poorly. I'm just trying to create a comparison that all that's asked of you in Mythic Zeros, or what's asked of you in Mythic Zeros, is a lot different than higher keys. And very importantly, repercussions of mechanics and missed mechanics are just almost non-existent in Mythic Zero. So I'm trying to create a comparison that although things look different here, although things are different here, this is what you can expect when you start doing it on harder levels. It's all prep for higher levels. So when it comes to timing your heals here, I can't say I know fully too well yet, but when these ads spawn, you definitely want to have your rift out, have an evangelism. I think I used evangelism there. And then on this run-in, obviously this is where we want to time heals as well. Radiance into Mind Blast. Into our first uppies. I think I played Death on my way up there to maximize, and nothing on the way down.
I sense great despair emanating from within.
Alright, last boss. Also, I think I'm more familiar with the damage pattern here, and it's pretty much just constant damage. So you have to be really strong with your uptime. Also, there's 3 target cleave. So you want to make sure you're tracking that with your party frames in grid 2. You want to give those people extra love, defensive penance, pain sups. In a Mythic 0, you can get away with just atonement healing. And then something else you're not going to see in a Mythic 0 is we have an intermission phase where he takes increased damage. We do one phase this boss, but exiting that intermission phase, there's group-wide damage, one like hit. So it's important to have people topped, but I don't think we'll see that here. Okay, PI's out. Radiance and Evangelism, just stacking my proc. Also on Rip. Excuse me, I just took a Rip. On Rip, high fade uptime here is going to be good for you, so having a good keybind for that. Okay, so here's the 3 target cleave. Doesn't look like any of them played personals, but that's okay for now. But that might be a pain sup if you see a personal is missed. Defensive penance, etc. So I'm doing my best. There's always gaps between one rift to the next. Well, most of the time. Okay, I'm selected. Could have used Desperate Prayer there. There's usually gaps between rifts. That's a great time to redot. That's a great time to reatone. Okay, and here comes our intermission. Well-timed rift to get a lot of output. Death then penance for torments. I also use my macro to collapse my rift early for the damage grab. And M0 Seed of the Triumvirate complete. So this is probably my last video of M+. I'm going to be switching over to actual keys moving forward. So stay tuned for those. I think we can start talking about mechanics a little bit differently and a little bit more in depth. I plan to continue posting some AUG videos in my off time, but obviously my main is Discipline. But I really want to run AUG, especially like when my team isn't on. I think that's going to be a fun and positive way to expand my channel. But yeah, so nothing to fret with this damage reduction that's on the way. I think Discipline is still in a really good spot to do well and succeed in Mythic Plus. But yeah, I guess that's it for the video. Check me out on Medify, book a private lesson. Please support with a comment, like, and a subscribe. And until next time, Disc out.